if you find everything falling on, oh my God, I got to get it done, it's due in an hour, or my kid's game is tonight, then you need to be coming up with systems. Systems are also a really big help in households. Systems like almost, standard operating procedures of when you get things done or how you get things done can be helpful so that everyone's on the same page.
Welcome to another episode of Mental Health in the Age of the Metaverse. I'm your host, Christian Ulstrup. My guest today is Dr. Kathryn Esquer. She is a licensed psychologist, MBA graduate, mom to two, and founder of the Teletherapist Network, which is a consultation community for the next generation of therapists. She is passionate about eliminating isolation and burnout in the field of mental health. By prioritizing connection and community, the Teletherapist Network brings together forward-thinking therapists to achieve their big goals in work and life. Kathryn, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Christian. It's great to be here.
So I thought it'd be great to dig right into the Teletherapist Network. This is how you and I originally connected. I had heard about this through somebody else. They put me in touch with you, and I was immediately really impressed by what you had built, especially in such a short period of time. I think for a lot of therapists, digital media is still a new thing generally. And certainly when it comes to working with clients, it was difficult for a lot of folks to make that transition to teletherapy from in person at the beginning of COVID. But you not only did that, you actually founded a whole community around it. So I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about how that happened.
Yeah, thank you so much for your kind words. I think sometimes when we are in the midst of building something or running something, we kind of forget to take a step back and look at how far we've come. So it was really nice to hear. But yeah, so going into the pandemic, actually, funny story. Going into the pandemic, I had broken my arm and I had a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old. It was just my husband and I and the 2 kids and me with one arm. Actually broke it roller skating with my kids. So I thought, you're young and spry until you're not, I'll tell you. And then the pandemic hit and we were just like a whirlwind of changes, of adaptations, of losing childcare, of transitioning to telehealth. And yeah, that doesn't really seem like a great time to start a new endeavor. And I didn't start it right away. I didn't start the Teletherapist Network, in March of 2020. But what happened prior to starting the Teletherapist Network is my whole household really buckled down and we got focused on what was important to us, on where we can, and this was limited, outsource help and where we really needed to prioritize our time. And so we really went back to the basics of, lots of family quality time, lots of work and home life and nothing else really in between because there wasn't really that opportunity. We also had my sister move in with us. And that was a big change, not only for my whole household, but also for helping to care for the kids. I have 2 younger sisters, one of which was finishing up school. And we bribed her with a room and board to come move in with us and help care for the kids. And so I was really lucky that a couple months into the pandemic, we really found our jive and our groove on how to balance work and life pretty effectively and efficiently. I know that's not the case for everyone. I fully acknowledge my privilege. But with that came some extra time and energy on my hands. I know that sounds really ridiculous to say, but in July of 2020, we had full-time living childcare with my sister. We were still working, but we didn't have our long commutes anymore. All of our extracurriculars were taken away. And so I was feeling, super supported and happy about how my career was going and how my family was, but I was feeling socially and professionally isolated. I didn't have those outlets that I used to have, and I had more time than I don't know if I've ever had before. So it was this paradox of I have this time, but I don't have these outlets that I would normally go to spend my free time or to feel socially fulfilled. And socially, both like for fun and also professionally. Therapists cannot work in isolation just by themselves. Like we bring our humanness into the therapy room. And part of that is meeting other therapists to be able to check our humanness and say, hey, have you thought of this? What are you doing here? How can I support you here? So that's where the teletherapist network came in. This is also a bit of a funny, event, is that I was not on Facebook for 3 years prior to starting the teletherapist network. I went off Facebook just because it was just a time suck for me. I enjoyed connecting with people, but I thought I could do it in a higher quality way, phone and text and emails individually or group versus this like kind of public following or public communication on Facebook. And so I was not on it for 3 years, and I didn't know the therapist groups existed. I didn't know there were 1,000 people, therapist Facebook groups out there. I had no clue. And so I thought, oh man, I'm going to start this novel thing. It's going to be a community for therapists. We're going to be able to connect and share resources. And I started it. And then I found out that there was these groups, and I'm glad I didn't know, because I probably would have talked myself out of it. But what has happened since then is the teletherapist network has become this kind of safe haven, this digital space away from social media for therapists to connect with other therapists, and a quality over quantity is how we say it. There are not 1,000 posts happening a day. There are maybe 5 to 10, but they're all super high quality, and therapists looking for very specific guidance or specific situations, specific consultations or resources. So it's really designed to be not like a Facebook group, even though I would have talked myself out of it. It's designed to, you log in, you get your social and professional, fill your cup, you get your consultation needs met, you get that, boost of energy you get from peers, and then you get out and you get on with your life. There's no shiny objects. There's no ads. There's no, distant cousins causing drama. It is literally just this professional space, and it's designed to get in and get out. It's not designed to be a time suck. And that's not our goal, because as therapists, we wear so many different hats, not only, in our careers, but also in our personal lives. And so you don't need another time suck or another black hole of social media to grapple with. So that's kind of how it got started, my ignorance of Facebook, Facebook groups. And I'm glad that it happened, because now I can see the difference of hosting it away from social media and on a totally separate private platform was really beneficial in the long run.
A couple of things come to mind there. One is that you highlighted the value of having that separation. And, the name of this podcast is Mental Health in the Age of the Metaverse. I think this problem is something that a lot of folks are grappling with. You go onto one of these platforms thinking that you want one thing. Sometimes you do it mindlessly, which is not good. And then you find yourself distracted. It's like everything's in one place. Like you said, you got the cousin who's causing drama, or maybe there's some headline that grabs your attention, something like that. But you were actually able to build this community. And to be clear, this is on a totally separate platform from Facebook. It's like its own private community. That was valuable enough that, the therapists who are part of this is paid membership. Is that right?
Yep. Membership community.
That they're able to really get something else out of it. I was wondering if, I don't know if any examples come to mind, but what are the advantages that you've seen in really creating that separation, and how does it play out in the benefits that the group gets, group dynamics?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, I could go into hours long talk on building how to and why to build communities. But I think that for us, the separation allows it to be pretty focused and high quality interactions. I think when you are scrolling through a feed or through a jumble of different pieces of information coming your way, or different sources of information, different topics, it's easy to forget your role in a specific community, right? This is a professional and social community where we bring our whole selves as therapists into it, but we do keep our professional, hats, maybe maybe not on all the time, but at least within view. We're not off there spouting, you know, inappropriate criticisms or, you know, hiding behind a computer screen and, you know, saying things we wouldn't say to someone in person. It really creates this I know you sense of I know these other members, they know me, and it helps build that level of trust in the
Mhm.
community that if it was integrated into a lot of other communities wouldn't be there. You wouldn't, you know, log on to the network and expect to see my friend Nikki there talking about something and knowing Nikki has been going through this journey with one particular client. It would be lost in a bunch of other communities kind of layered onto your feed. So
Mhm.
the separation not only helps with boundaries for ourselves as people who use technology, but also boundaries within in the community, which help create that trust. It's not a porous community. It's not a community integrated with other topics or other agendas. Agendas, I think, would be a good word. Agendas, and I mean, we all know we need that trust in our communities.
Makes a ton of sense. I mean, I think, yeah, having clarity around what the expectations are, so the group norms, everything else, if that's common knowledge across all the members, I could
Mhm.
see how that would be, yeah, it gives you a pretty high degree of feeling safety,
Mhm.
reliability. These are going to be quality experiences. Here's how to act. Um, Makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like, based on what you're saying before about your planning during the pandemic, you're quite an intentional person. Maybe that's the MBA in you.
That's so funny. I think I've tried to become more intentional with
Huh.
how I build my life and how I build my structure, my days. I've tried to become more intentional. Um, and I do think something shifted within me in the pandemic, both from a family personal standpoint, but also professionally with founding
Mhm.
the network. Something shifted within me about creating the community and the life I want. I always say this, but I'm a member first and founder and person who runs it second because
Yeah.
I really created the network for myself. It's what I needed at that time. And I deep down I knew I couldn't have been alone in feeling this way and wanting this professional community that isn't based on listservs or isn't based on Facebook groups. It's really a high quality community for, like I say, the next generation of therapists who have grown up in the digital age, who are used to Facebook groups. I am now, and but really are craving that deeper level connection and familiarity that doesn't involve flooding your inbox or doesn't involve boundaryless groups. So something shifted within me, I would say, over the last couple of years about the intentionality of it.
Very interesting. And when it comes to intentionality, so the therapist network is primarily digitally mediated. Um, do you guys do in-person meetups?
We do. Here's the deal: when you are part of a close knit group, like your friendships are going to form and people are going to meet up. So
Right.
the network does not officially organize anything. There has been rumblings about a conference or a retreat for our members because we
Right.
all have become so close. But I have definitely met up with a ton of members in person, and other members have made deep friendships or professional connections in their cities, and they have met up. So nothing officially endorsed, but there's definitely offline meetups happening.
Interesting. Interesting. You're getting people back to reality.
Yeah. Well, that's what I always say. I see the network as a starting place. It's supposed to the be all end all, keep all communication in it. It's a starting place. It's a melting pot of therapists across degrees and locations. And it's a neat group.
And the intentionality piece, I'd love to
Hmm.
dig into that a little bit more, even outside of your role in the teletherapist
Yeah.
network. So you're a clinical psychologist, you're also an executive coach,
Hmm.
and you're a mom. Um, that intentionality bit when it comes to using technology across those different roles.
Hmm.
Um, could you tell me a little bit about how you think about it, whether it's using technology with clients as a coach or as a therapist, and then also in raising a family? What are you thinking about when it comes to using using these tools?
Yeah. You know, uh, I think that intentionality is important when we think about the mode of delivery. Delivery is part of the message, right? And so when I think about how to deliver the best interventions for my clients, clients both coaching and both with my therapy world, I've been online coaching, digital coaching and virtual coaching I've been doing that since, oh my goodness, 2015. It has been a part of the coaching world for many, many years. And it's been effective, incredibly effective. And what is allowed was, not just the great coaching interventions, but it's allowed for more continuous session meetings, more high quality focus that you're not going to get if you're commuting and traveling and taking time off work, more ROI for the coaching because you can, take a break for 45 minutes to an hour, get the coaching and go back to work. The intentionality is not just about what you are delivering, but how you're delivering it and what other benefits can come from it. And I think with therapy, that is what we were all forced into in the pandemic is, oh, look, telehealth is more convenient for my clients. Telehealth, I'm seeing patients that probably would have dropped off once they had maybe a 50% symptom reduction, but they're still coming because they can go out to their car in the middle of their work day, take their lunch and have a session, and they can go right back in without missing 2 hours from work. I'm in a rural community, so the commutes are long to my in-person office. So I think that with the intentionality, it's not just about the services, but it's about the ancillary benefits that perhaps aren't clear at first glance. They're a little bit deeper level. Having that option for telehealth can allow for so much more impactful work that we maybe wouldn't even know was there if we had only offered in-person services. So I think moving forward, like I said, the pandemic forced us all into this role and we saw the benefits. But moving forward, I think it's important for us to keep those benefits in mind and keep those options in mind for when we craft or create an intentional practice that works for our lives and our clients' lives.
And you mentioned unanticipated benefits.
Mm-hmm.
I'd imagine this is an experience that members of the community are sort of finding as well. I was wondering if you could share a story where you sort of discovered one of those anticipated or unanticipated benefits, or maybe heard about it, because I think this is something I've heard is sort of people are pleasantly surprised by what might be possible.
Mm-hmm. I think one of my favorite stories, and this isn't a really like very big story, but I had been working with a executive coaching client for several years at this point. So we had a pretty deep relationship. We actually used Virgils to have a session in VR in the Metaverse. And it was an incredible experience. Thinking I knew this person so darn well that I've spoken to this person, almost weekly for 2+ years. And then I get into the metaverse and I can see, full movements and full stances and moving around and the playfulness. And it brought a whole different dimension of this person's personality out that we were able to then use in executive presence work moving forward. It was a really neat, eye-opening experience for myself about how much I had been missing. And I can't even put my finger on it because we know that our gut tells us things, or we pick up as therapists, we pick up on therapists or parents. We know when a toddler is going to have a meltdown because of all these tiny little cues that we can't necessarily put our finger on, but we know in our gut and in our soul, something's about to go down. And so I can't really give you exactly what I picked up on, but I did pick up on this whole different dimension of his personality that he could be bringing into work and use in, strategic ways. So it was a really, really neat experience to use it for coaching too.
And this was a client who you had seen remotely for 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, never in person.
So I know you said you don't know. It's something you can't quite put your finger on, but I am curious if you have any hunches as to,
I do. I think one of it is, you show up differently in the metaverse. I think he probably brought in a different part of his personality that I had not been maybe here and there privy to in, informal starts and endings to our meetings, but normally it was down to business. And in the metaverse, it was more like I saw him off guard. And it was it really was an incredible experience for both of us.
Interesting. Almost maybe a little bit more playful.
Yeah, absolutely more playful. And that I think was important to helping him move forward with his goals that we were working towards. Again, like that, we bring our whole people, I bring my whole person into my work, and I help others do the same. And so when it's tough to bring your whole person in, sometimes you need a different delivery, a different mode to kind of tap into that other dimension.
Well, I think we're probably, based on where things are going, who knows what Apple's going to come out with next year. I think we're in for a lot more surprises going forward.
I know.
As a technology person, I'm very excited about.
I saw the Metaverse commercial,
Yes.
and incredible. It got me so excited, and I was like, we're still on the right path.
Well, this is probably a good segue. A lot of folks have concerns about that path. I think somewhat justifiably, and we've talked a lot about the benefits, of which there are many, and they are being continuously discovered and uncovered. But there are, real justifiable concerns that therapists, that parents, a lot of people have around the use of digital media in general. And I'm curious, if you have any thoughts on challenges that you've seen with clients or elsewhere, when it comes to technology becoming something that's unhealthy. Is that something that you've seen? Does anything come to mind there?
Well, anything could be unhealthy, right?
Yeah.
Everything in moderation, right? So anything not in moderation has the potential to become unhealthy. The first thing, the funny story that comes to mind is, as a mom of toddlers, you're always trying to get them to eat their vegetables and try new things and try new vegetables. And so every year we grow a garden. And last year we tried cucumbers for the first time, and they literally took over half my yard. And we had so many cucumbers, but thankfully my then 1.5-year-old loved cucumbers. The girl would sit down and eat 2 whole cucumbers in a sitting. Now, I was thrilled. She loved cucumbers, and she still loves cucumbers. And we've moved on to pickles, and it's great. But had she only eaten cucumbers for that whole summer, had I let her only eat cucumbers, I had the supply, that would have been pretty unhealthy, right? So anything without that moderation piece is going to be unhealthy. And so, yes, absolutely, technology is part of that realm where it can become unhealthy without moderation. And with kids, they don't know how to moderate. My daughter would have eaten cucumbers for the whole summer, and she would have been super hydrated, which would have been great. But we need to help teach them, help model moderation for them, and what feels good to us, not just in the moment, but in our whole person, in our whole being, right? So I think that with technology in my own home, and I am not a technology pro, I fully admit that, but we use technology as a tool for perhaps entertainment at times. Perhaps we use it as a tool so that we could get dinner cooked. We use it as a tool for our own breaks if needed, but we use it as a tool, and we teach that moderation. And ideally, my husband and I can be better about this, but ideally we also model that moderation as well with our own technology use. My husband and I are notorious for walking around with our cell phones all the time and answering emails when they come in. And we could be doing a better job, because it's not just the technology with the iPads and with the Kindle Fires, but it's also our own use of it as well.
Yeah, there's a study from University of Wisconsin from, I think, maybe a month and a half ago that was published that shows exactly what you're saying, that technology habits and the impact that it has downstream on physical and mental health are largely a consequence of behavior that's modeled by the parents.
I got to read that.
Have to include that in the show notes. I'll send that over to you. But I think on that point, we do work with a lot of parents who are trying to figure out how to get a handle on family screen time.
Yeah.
This is a, I think, increasingly common challenge. And a lot of parents that we talk to, it's out, you guys are thinking about this. You're very intentional. That's not the case for everybody. A lot of folks simply don't know what to do. All they see is, hey, whenever I look over at my kid, they're sort of hypnotized by the iPad. I'm not really sure what's going on. you're a parent, especially if you're working, you don't have a lot of energy or time to spend to try to pull them away from it. So if you were in that position, or you were talking to a parent who was in that position of like, I don't even know what to do to start. I'm nervous that something bad is happening, but I don't know for sure. What would you recommend they do or think about as a first step?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a really great question. I think, the the famous therapist answer is it depends, right? It depends on the work, more about what they have available to them. Are there resources that they haven't been tapping into? I think so often as
Right.
parents, we don't. There is help around us, and so often we either don't ask for it or even openly reject it because we want to, or we want to do it ourselves, right?
Mhm.
So I would immediately ask for other resources. It sounds like this parent is at their max, and so many of us, myself included, can relate to that. Well, if you're at your max and you don't have the bandwidth to be able to, tackle any type of parenting transition, like potty training, I'm thinking like any type of parenting transition, well, we need to decrease what's on your plate. How can we either decrease what's on your plate by asking for help and outsourcing, or can we decrease what you've been putting on your plate? Like, just don't put it on your plate to begin with, right?
Right.
So I think boundaries for parents are incredibly important. And I know I'm speaking from a place of privilege where I have family around me. I literally moved back to my hometown to have family around me to help me.
Mhm.
But I think that there are creative solutions that we can get to, because if the parent, it sounds like to me, I'd more work on the parent burnout right now. Until
Mhm.
they have the bandwidth to be able to tackle a change in their household, because so often
Mhm.
technology becomes like a fifth member of the family, right? And so
Mhm.
if we are changing a pretty big dynamic or a common habit or a social norm in the family, then we need to be prepared, just like you would prepare for potty training, and you'd get ready and read some books and clear your weekend. Well, maybe the same can be said for changing the role of technology in our the management of our daily house.
That's really interesting. That this is something that's come up in a few conversations. You mentioned the fifth member of the house. I've heard this sort of again and again. It almost feels like there is
Mhm.
that person in your home, and it could be worst case, it's a stranger who's telling your kids
Mm,
that are contradicting what you're saying,
yeah.
or it could be someone who's really helpful and they're on the same page and they get the norms and everything else. And so what I'm hearing you say is that first step is just making sure that you have kind of the activation energy and you
Yeah.
have sufficient resources to even take stock of
Mhm.
what's going on.
Mhm.
Uh, how was, a lot of people have different resources, but how would you, like, can you do an audit to see what you have available that you're not using? I mean, it's like, how would you think about that?
Now you're tapping into the executive coach in me. I love the urgent important matrix, or the
Yeah.
Eisenhower matrix, where you rank you I literally a couple times a year carry this, it's 4 quadrants, and you rank all your tasks on the y-axis and the x-axis, one of which is how important is it versus not important is it, and the other is how urgent or time sensitive versus not time sensitive. And if you carry around this, if you Google it, you can find it easy. If you carry around these quadrants, and literally put down every daily task into the matrix, you have a better sense of what you can get off your plate, what you can outsource, what you really should be focusing on over other things. Instead of having a 20-item to-do list where everything feels like it's the same weight. It is not.
Mm,
So that's how I
I
would
love
that's
that.
how I personally take inventory.
MBA to MBA.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be a discussion if we didn't bring up a 2x2.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great piece of advice. Very simple. Sort of take stock of what's going on, the urgent and important stuff. But the key there is that the with the stuff that's not urgent but it is important, that's something that
Mhm,
you schedule time for.
mhm,
Or
mhm.
yeah.
And that's where you should be spending most of your time, with planned out tasks. If you find everything falling on, oh my God, I got to get it done, it's due in an hour, or my kid's game is tonight, then you need to be coming up with systems. Systems are also a really big help in households. Systems,
Mhm.
like almost, standard operating procedures of when you get things done or how you get things done can be helpful so that everyone's on the same page.
Cool. Well, that sounds like a business ready to be created right there.
I mean, that's a whole nother podcast episode.
Yeah. You obviously run a community called the Teletherapist Network. We spoke briefly about even folks getting together in person.
Yeah.
Before I hit record, we were talking about this being kind of a broader discussion that's going on in the mental health professional community, which is now that the pandemic is, I guess, nominally over or something like that. There are questions around transitioning back to in-person sessions. Does telehealth still matter?
Oh, absolutely. I think that there's different schools of camp on this, but I liken it to when, emails came out, right? I don't know if you can remember that, but it's always going to be a part of our practice now, having the ability to digitally communicate with our patients, and now have digital sessions with our patients, have remote sessions with our patients. We're not going to go back to a time where we're only communicating with our patients via telephone or in person. That's it, right? You wouldn't think of running a practice without an email address. Just like now, you most likely wouldn't think about running a practice without having an option for telehealth. I think that it's becoming part of the expectation of our clients, and it helps with the leeway of running a practice ourselves. I think I still see patients. I see probably about 50% of my patients in person. And that's great. But I would say 75% of them take advantage of telehealth from time here or time there. They take advantage of it sometimes. But having that option has allowed us to do continuous good work. And that is so important, especially for people in my community who don't have transportation or have physical disabilities or are extremely, predisposed to COVID and other ancillary, things. I don't want to give out too many names. I'm going to start identifying patients, but specific patients are going to mind where they can't come into an office regularly. And so this allows us to continue to do work with them. And I think that that's going to be, that continuous care is going to be part of all of our work moving forward, not having, well, they couldn't come in or they couldn't schedule. Hopefully it'll change. It'll change a lot in our field.
And that makes sense to me. So it's, even the framing of the question is sort of based on false premises. It's not a black and white kind of thing. And so we have this tool that's in the toolkit and increased accessibility. Makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
So speaking of patients who you work with, as we mentioned before, you are in clinical practice in addition to everything else that you're doing. There's, the mental health crisis is now very much in the zeitgeist. You have top tier publications like the New York Times talking about it or publishing pieces on it, but you're really on the front lines. What is a mental health topic that you believe is not getting enough attention currently?
Therapist pay. 100%. We're getting a lot of talks about, some of the other digital healthcare companies who shall remain nameless, who are paying therapists $30 an hour. And yeah, we should be outraged by that. But I think what's not getting attention is that the base insurance reimbursement for therapists is not commensurate with our educations, and it's not commensurate with our service to communities. It's not even comparable to other health practitioners like nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, or physicians themselves, depending on your level of education as a therapist. They don't even compare to what physical health providers are getting reimbursed. So yes, we can absolutely look at the outrage in some areas, but I think we should be outraged at the base reimbursement, that basic, what everything else is based off of, what private pays are based off of. Everything is based off those health insurance reimbursements. It's not going to increase accessibility or affordability of therapy until health insurers get on board with reimbursing us.
The national carriers, they really set the pace for everybody else.
Absolutely.
So these are, I would just dig into that a little bit. These are, multi-billion-dollar companies. Sure, United's probably worth something like almost, I don't know, It's not a trillion, but it's up there. They employ a lot of smart people who, think about these things. What is it that they're not getting that would cause them to, what are they not understanding basically about this?
I think they fully understand it. Maybe I'm giving them too much of the benefit. I would assume they're smart enough to understand it. I don't think there's any consequences to not. And what's happening is that the consequences of paying therapists more of not paying therapists more, commensurate with equal education and service in physical health providers, is that so many therapists are going to private pay and charging, $250 an hour. Plus, that comes directly out of the patient's pocket. Now, I fully support private pay practitioners. We have most of them in our network, I would say 50-50, maybe insurance and private pay. And they deserve those rates, absolutely. But it decreases accessibility to care for some patients who cannot afford those rates.
Right.
With them then going through their insurance, they have to go through a provider who accepts their insurance. And those providers, myself included, who accepts insurance, we are completely booked and have been booked for years because there's not enough of us. So I really think the issue of accessibility of care is going to be reimbursing therapists so that we want to be we want to provide therapy services in exchange for health insurance reimbursement.
That makes sense. This kind of makes me think this is like a pretty complicated problem because you do have, last I checked, it was like 50% of therapists, I think, are in private practice, at least to some extent. And I know a lot of folks, there's kind of a mix, but if you do have a private market where people are willing to pay hundreds of dollars an hour for care, that I guess considered to be a private good. But then, like you're saying, you have a lot of clients, especially if you're working with a local community, which that's a big part, I would assume, of being a therapist, right? Is working with folks across the board. There's, they don't have the ability to pay those rates. And so you're now in this position where you're kind of expected to provide both a private and a public good, but the economic incentives, or I guess the architecture, isn't really conducive to supporting that.
Absolutely. And then if you think about it with wellness checks, right, with your primary care, if that was optional and cost $250 and you're feeling okay, but you're more tired than usual, even if you can afford it, are you going to go in and get a wellness check for $250 if your insurance isn't going to pay a dime? Like, probably not. Like, the utilization is not there. It has, even people who can afford and want to afford the $200 or $250, it has to be pretty bad to be able to commit to that. You're not going to go in when things start to slide. You're going to wait until shit's hitting the fan, excuse my language, but we're going to go do this now. I think the utilization would also go up, which is not necessarily, it benefits the health insurance companies because when we care for our mental health, our physical health obviously gets cared for as well. And we see physical health benefits when we care for our mental health, but that's down the road. Immediately, the health insurance companies are going to see a higher level of utilization, which is not necessarily beneficial to them financially.
Right. And the challenge too is, mental health is, this is something that's foundational for sort of your life. Especially for kids and teens, right? When you're in those formative stages. So if you have customers or insurance like churning out at, every few years, then it's hard to make the case to the CFO that this is, because otherwise you're just subsidizing your competitors.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, unfortunately, the public health crisis is growing, so we'll have to figure out new solutions.
I know that's a whole nother. I could speak forever on this, but yes,
we'll have to have me back on.
Absolutely.
So there was one topic that really caught my eye when I was looking at your bio beforehand, and this is that you've done some research that I thought was very interesting, very unique, and it was around the topic of the intersection of spirituality and leadership. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, we're going back some years. Absolutely. That was my doctoral dissertation. I did a joint degree program where I completed my doctorate of clinical psychology as well as a master's of business administration. And so for my doctoral dissertation, I wanted to include some type of leadership dimension since it
Sure.
kind of tied my two degrees together. And what I found incredibly fascinating was the lack of literature around spirituality, religiosity, Christianity, even in leadership literature. And I thought it was fascinating. And I also thought it was fascinating that when I started to bring up the topic of why isn't there a lot here? Why don't we look into it? I got a huge response from people in my professional organizations at the time. They were in two camps, one of which was, yeah, I have been looking for that literature too. I use it in my own work, but there's nothing out there. This absolutely needs to be looked into. And the other camp was absolutely not. What are you thinking? You're going to sink your own boat before you even set sail by using spirituality, even in any context with leadership. It doesn't belong there. It does not belong in the coaching room. And so I just, that polarization was like, ooh, this is juicy and I'm going to look into it. So it gave me even more of a motivation to do that research. And so I did empirical research on is there a connection between one's spirituality, so their levels of religiosity, and their leadership skills. We measured it in different ways. But what we found was, yes, there is a connection. If you rank higher on the spirituality level or scale, you tend to have better leadership skills. And that was great. But why? Right. And so we went in and we found a moderator in the middle, which is your ethical compass. So your ethics, your moral compass. And so we found that leaders who tend to be higher in people who are higher in spirituality ranked higher in morality. And that morality piece is what led to better leadership skills and higher leadership levels. So you don't have to be spiritual to be a good leader, but you want to develop morality in order, or developing your morality can help your leadership skills. It doesn't necessarily hinge on your spirituality, because you can be a very moral, ethical person without having that spirituality piece. So we found it's the morals that matter most.
That is so fascinating. And I'm trying to think about how this plays out. Like, is it almost that as you get to higher levels of power or leadership within an organization, you have more leeway to basically make whatever decision you want? And so that reveals what you really believe around ethics or morality, or
how the world works.
What's going on there?
I mean, there's different theories. And to be frank, it has been so long since I did this research and I did not continue it. But, one of the theories is that, spirituality, religion, spirituality, growing up with a faith of some sort, or even developing one later in life, it helps you learn or frame the world around you in a certain lens. It teaches you how the world works, what to expect from the world, what to expect from yourself. It's kind of like a script, right? And so, what we found is that script taught in religion helps develop morality, but you can have that script, you can have the same outlook on life without the spirituality piece. And so when you get up into higher levels or even lower levels, like if you expect others to be, good people who rise to the occasion, you're going to treat them differently than if you expect others to always cheat you and swindle you. And that's a huge difference of leadership styles right there and how you show up as a leader. And so developing that morality, that how the world works is a moral and ethical place, can help you treat others and show up differently as a leader.
Really interesting. Well, I hope somebody is
picking up on that.
Excited your work and is continuing that forward. So this one I always have fun with. Try to ask all the guests, and the answers are wide ranging. But the name of the podcast is Mental Health in the Age of the Metaverse. The Metaverse, in some ways, we're kind of already there. You and I are speaking over video chat right now, but we are going from 2D to 3D with immersive experiences, VR, AR, artificial intelligence is getting more powerful by the day. The cost of all this stuff when it comes to digital media production, distribution, it's going down, down and down. And ultimately, the line between reality and virtual reality or cyberspace or the metaverse is growing blurrier. Why does reality still matter in the 21st century?
I mean, reality is never going to not matter because I think the fundamental question is, what is reality? I fully believe we create our own reality. My reality is different than yours, and maybe my reality is housed differently than yours is. So I think that why does reality matter is almost needs to be subsumed by what is our reality? What is our individual realities? And is it working for us?
Do you think it's working in the age of technology?
I think it is, but it's an individual question. Like, it's working for me. I'm able to create a really awesome community in the metaverse digitally, right? And I'm able to serve patients digitally. But for some others who feel their reality is socially isolated or not fulfilling, then no, it's not working. It kind of goes back to what we talked about before with that intentionality. We need to be intentional with the realities we create.
And so just to make it more concrete, like
you're going to make this question more concrete.
Yeah. I was like, no, I mean, I think it is relevant because one of the, things that we heard from parents is a lot of them, they'll have kids who struggle very specifically with video game use. Mm-hmm. And that's a reality that can, or an experience that can be extremely compelling. And so, if you kind of play that trajectory out, you can imagine how the systems get better, the technology gets better until you get to the point where for a lot of folks, I mean, that might be all that they really want to do. It's totally personalized. So you don't have to deal with the messiness of compromising with other people because they have their own, reality and meeting in the middle. I guess, yeah. I mean, is there a reason even in that world where you could have everything completely tailored to what your desires or needs are? Is there still a place to, get back to reality, which is going to be a little bit more challenging in us?
Oh, that's an interesting scenario because I just part of my own core belief is coming at everyone I sit with a sense of non-judgment. So if that reality is working for them, that is not, in my perspective, not for me to judge. I would question if it is working for them and where is it not. But I don't want to rule out the possibility that reality might work for some people. And why does that reality work for some people? I think I'm sorry, I'm throwing more questions at you than answers, but I don't have the answers for individuals. I just help them find their own. So I would more come at it from, how is it serving you? What in the world around you outside of the screen is not serving you or doesn't feel good. And, I'm sure there would be inroads there to be able to maybe adapt what they're gaining from the virtual world and figure out strategies on how to get that in the world around them.
It makes sense. Yeah. So, I mean, this is kind of hard to play out in the abstract, right? So it really comes down to the person.
Yeah, it does.
Intentionality.
And absolutely.
Well, Kathryn, you're online in a few different places. I'm going to make sure listeners have a chance to connect with you. You're primarily on Instagram, is that right?
We are. We're on Instagram at teletherapist.network.
Perfect. I'll put that in the show notes. And then the Teletherapist Network website is teletherapistnetwork.com, where it's a very mental health professional. You can apply for access to the community. It's paid membership, and you guys do screen members. Is that right?
Yeah, we'd love to have you apply and join us. We are a very close-knit community, and we only accept members at different points of time. So if you're listening and our doors are closed, join our wait list, and we will let you know, and you'll be the first one in the door when we reopen. We are very purposeful and intentional about how and when we grow.
Perfect. I love that. Kathryn, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We have a lot more I think we can talk about. I'd love to have you back on.
Absolutely, Christian. Thank you.